I'm Amber Mitchell, 24 years old, sitting alone at the most expensive restaurant in the city, staring at a $12,000 bill I can't pay. My hands shake as I read my parents' note. Let's see how failure finds his way out of this one. Consider it life training. They planned this joke to teach me about responsibility, something they claim I lack. But this time, they've gone too far. The leather check holder feels like it weighs 1,000 pounds as I struggle to breathe. If you're watching this, let me know where you're viewing from and hit that like and subscribe button to follow my journey from this humiliating moment to the unexpected path it led me down. Growing up in the Mitchell household meant living under a microscope. My parents, Lauren and Jason Mitchell, built their real estate empire from scratch, turning a small investment into a multi-million-dollar business within a decade. Their success story was impressive, but it cast a long shadow over my childhood. Every achievement wasn't celebrated, it was expected. Every failure was magnified and cataloged for future reference. Our 5-bedroom house in Highland Park showcased their success with its marble countertops and sweeping staircase, but the perfectionism that permeated every corner made it feel more like a museum than a home. Photographs of family vacations displayed on the walls captured smiling faces, but the cameras missed the tension before each shot, my mother adjusting my posture or my father reminding me to smile like you mean it. Excellence isn't a goal, Amber. It's the baseline, my father would say while reviewing my report card. An A- in calculus wasn't cause for celebration, but for concerned conversations about slipping standards. My mother would sit beside him, nodding in agreement, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the kitchen table. The lessons started early. When I was 7, I forgot my lines during a school play. Instead of comfort, I received a week of mandatory rehearsals in our living room. At 12, I came in second place at a regional spelling bee. My prize was 3 additional hours of vocabulary practice each day for a month. We're preparing you for the real world, my mother would explain. No one out there rewards mediocrity. The defining moment came during my senior year of high school. Despite maintaining a 4.0 GPA, participating in numerous extracurriculars, and securing admission to several prestigious universities, I committed the ultimate sin in the Mitchell household. I chose to attend Rhode Island School of Design instead of my parents' alma mater, Princeton University. Art? My father had scoffed, sliding my acceptance letter across the table like it was contaminated. That's not a career path, Amber. That's a hobby. My mother's disappointment manifested in a more subtle, but equally painful way. I just don't understand why you'd throw away your potential like this, she said, her voice carrying that familiar note of resignation that had become the soundtrack to our relationship. Despite their disapproval, I followed my passion. For years of art school gave me a taste of freedom, but financial realities meant I couldn't completely sever ties. My parents paid my tuition, a fact they never let me forget, though they made it clear this investment was reluctant at best. After graduation, I secured a position at a small but respected gallery in Chicago. For 18 months, I maintained my independence, even if my studio apartment could fit inside my parents' walk-in closet. I was making it on my own terms. Until I wasn't. Budget cuts hit the gallery hard. As the newest hire, I was the first to go. With rent due and savings depleted, I faced the humiliating prospect of moving back home at 24. My parents' response to my predicament was a mixture of smug satisfaction and conditional support. Of course you can stay with us, my mother said over the phone. This is what happens in the art world. At least now you understand. The move back home re-established old patterns with frightening speed. My bedroom remained unchanged, a time capsule of high school achievements, but new rules were implemented. Curfews, check-ins, career strategy sessions that invariably involved suggestions for business school applications. The word failure became more frequent in my parents' vocabulary. It wasn't always direct. Sometimes it was wrapped in concern or disguised as advice, but it was ever present. Each job rejection letter or unanswered email became evidence in their ongoing case against my chosen path. 3 months into this arrangement, My father announced we would be having dinner at Lucille, the most exclusive restaurant in the city where reservations were typically booked months in advance. We'll be dining with the Thompsons, he explained, referencing longtime business associates. Wear something appropriate. The drive to the restaurant was uncomfortably silent except for my mother's occasional comments about my appearance. Couldn't you have done something more with your hair? She asked, eyeing my simple updo in the rearview mirror. First impressions matter. I stared out the window, watching the city lights blur together, unaware that this dinner would become a turning point in my life, just not in the way my parents had planned. Lucille occupied the entire top floor of a downtown skyscraper, its glass walls offering panoramic views of the city skyline. A uniformed doorman greeted us as we entered the marble lobby, and a private elevator whisked us to the restaurant. The maitre d' recognized my father immediately. Mr. Mitchell, how wonderful to see you again. Your table is ready. We followed him through the dimly lit restaurant, passing tables of well-dressed patrons engaged in hushed conversations. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the space, and live piano music provided a sophisticated soundtrack. I felt underdressed despite wearing my best black dress and the pearl earrings my grandmother had given me for graduation. Scott and Heather Thompson were already seated at our table. Scott rose to his feet, greeting my father with a firm handshake and my mother with a kiss on the cheek. Heather offered a practiced smile. "And this must be your daughter," Scott said, turning toward me with evaluating eyes. "Yes, Amber is staying with us temporarily," my father explained, emphasizing the word temporarily just enough to make me wince. "She's between opportunities at the moment." The way he phrased it made my job loss sound like a gap year rather than the professional setback it was. I forced a smile and extended my hand. "It's nice to meet you both," I said, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. Amber was working at an art gallery, my mother added as we took our seats. "Unfortunately, the arts sector can be so volatile." Heather nodded sympathetically. "My niece went through a similar phase. She's in law school now." The conversation moved on before I could defend my career choice, shifting to business matters and mutual acquaintances. I remained silent, studying the menu with growing alarm. The prices were astronomical. Appetizers starting at $80, main courses well into the hundreds. A sommelier appeared at our table, presenting my father with a leather-bound wine list. After a brief consultation, he selected a bottle of Chateau Margaux that cost more than my monthly rent had been in Chicago. "We're celebrating tonight," my father announced as the wine was poured. "Scott and I just closed the Westridge deal." Glasses were raised in a toast, and I joined in despite having no idea what the Westridge deal entailed. My parents had never included me in their business discussions, viewing my lack of interest in real estate as another personal failing. When it came time to order, my father waved his hand dismissively at the menu. "Get whatever you want, Amber. It's a special occasion." The others ordered with the confidence of people who dined at such establishments regularly. Foie gras, Kobe beef, truffle-infused everything. I selected the least expensive options I could find, which were still ridiculously priced. Throughout the appetizer course, I attempted to join the conversation several times, only to be subtly cut off or redirected. When I mentioned a prominent artist whose work the gallery had featured, my mother quickly changed the subject to the Thompsons' recent vacation in Bali. By the time the main course arrived, I'd given up trying to participate. I focused on my food instead, a perfectly cooked but modestly portioned sea bass that somehow justified its $200 price tag. Halfway through the meal, my father's phone rang. He checked the screen and frowned. "It's Jenkins," he said to Scott. "We should take this." "And I need to powder my nose," my mother added, standing up. "Heather, would you like to join me?" Within moments, I was alone at the table. I checked my watch after finishing my sea bass. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. At the 30-minute mark, I began to worry. I sent a text to my mother. "Everything okay?" No response. At 45 minutes, the server approached with dessert menus. "Will the rest of your party be returning soon?" he asked. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "They took a call." He nodded and retreated, only to return minutes later with a leather folder. In the meantime, the gentleman asked that I bring this to you. My stomach dropped as I accepted the folder. Inside was the bill, a single sheet of paper with a number that made me gasp: $12,459.87. Beneath it was a handwritten note in my father's unmistakable handwriting. Let's see how failure finds his way out of this one. Consider it life training. The room began to spin as I stared at the 5-figure sum on the bill. My lungs felt like they were collapsing, each breath becoming more shallow than the last. This couldn't be happening. Even for my parents, this level of cruelty seemed unimaginable. My trembling fingers reached for my phone, pulling up my father's contact. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried my mother next, same result. With growing panic, I sent text messages to both. This isn't funny. Please come back. The messages showed as delivered but remained unread. After several more attempts, I discovered both numbers had blocked me. This wasn't a momentary lesson. They had planned this humiliation meticulously. The server returned, hovering expectantly near the table. Is everything all right, miss? My parents. They'll be back any minute, I lied, voice cracking. They're just taking an important call. He nodded but remained unconvinced. Of course. Take your time. As he walked away, I noticed other diners glancing in my direction. Had word spread about my predicament? Or was my distress that visible? Either way, the weight of their stares intensified my humiliation. With shaking hands, I opened my banking app. My balance stared back at me, $267.43. Not even close to covering the appetizers, let alone the entire bill with its rare wines and expensive entrees. This wasn't the first lesson my parents had orchestrated. When I was 16, they had dropped me off at the mall without warning, taking my phone and wallet, telling me to figure out how to get home to teach me resource management. I'd ended up calling my grandmother from a store phone. During college, they had once forgotten to send my housing payment to teach me financial responsibility, forcing me to crash on a friend's couch until I could convince them to reinstate it. But this was different. This was public humiliation designed to break me completely. The restaurant manager approached my table, his expression professionally neutral, but eyes assessing. His name tag read Connor. Ms. Mitchell, is everything all right with your dining experience tonight? He asked, his tone revealing he already suspected something was wrong. I swallowed hard. There seems to be a misunderstanding. My parents, they stepped away, but they're handling the bill. Connor's expression didn't change. Your father called the restaurant. He informed us that you would be settling the account. My heart sank further. There must be a mistake, I whispered, though I knew there wasn't. This was exactly what my parents had planned. I'm afraid not. He was quite clear, Connor replied. His voice lowered slightly. Is there an issue with the payment? The tears I'd been fighting spilled over. I can't pay this, I admitted, the words burning my throat. I don't have this kind of money. His professional demeanor hardened. I see. In that case, I'll need to ask you to call someone who can help you resolve this situation. Otherwise, we may need to involve the authorities. The threat of police involvement sent a fresh wave of panic through me. A scene from a television show flashed through my mind, a woman being led out of a restaurant in handcuffs for dining and dashing. Would they actually arrest me? Could my parents really want this to happen? Please, I begged, let me try to figure something out. Can I make partial payment now and the rest later? Connor's expression remained impassive. I'm afraid we don't offer payment plans, Miss Mitchell. As we spoke, more diners turned to watch our interaction, their expressions ranging from curiosity to judgment. My public humiliation was now complete. With nowhere else to turn, I called my best friend Riley. I need help, I said when she answered, my voice barely audible. I'm at Lucille, and my parents left me with a huge bill as some kind of sick lesson. How huge? Riley asked. When I told her the amount, she gasped. Amber, I don't have that kind of money. I could maybe transfer you $200, but that's literally all I have until payday. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Anything helps, I said. After hanging up, Connor suggested I call other family members. With limited options, I tried my Aunt Jennifer, my mother's sister who had always been kinder than the rest of the family. "Sweetheart, I'm so sorry," she said after I explained the situation. "That sounds exactly like something your mother would do. I would help, but I'm in Europe right now. By the time I could transfer money, it would be too late." With each failed attempt, the reality of my situation became clearer. I was trapped exactly as my parents had intended. "Is there anything else you could offer as collateral?" Connor asked, his voice lowering again. "Jewelry?" "A watch." I shook my head, then paused. I did have one thing of potential value, my portfolio. I'd brought it to dinner hoping to show my parents my recent work, a pathetic attempt to earn their approval yet again. "I have my artwork," I said hesitantly. "Original pieces. They're worth something." Connor raised an eyebrow but gestured for me to show him. I retrieved the leather portfolio from beside my chair and carefully opened it on the cleared table. Inside were my best pieces, detailed urban landscapes with hidden elements that revealed themselves only upon close inspection. To my surprise, Connor's professional facade cracked slightly as he examined the first piece. "These are quite good," he said, studying the intricate details of a cityscape at dusk. "You did these?" I nodded, a tiny flicker of pride momentarily displacing my panic. "I specialized in urban architectural art at RISD, Rhode Island School of Design," he asked, looking up with new interest. "That's where my brother studied." For the first time that evening, someone was actually seeing my work, really seeing it, rather than dismissing it as a hobby or phase. Connor carefully examined each piece, asking questions about my technique and inspiration that revealed he knew more about art than I would have expected from a restaurant manager. "Did you ever exhibit at the Kingston Gallery?" he asked. "Some of your work reminds me of a show I saw there last year." The conversation about my art provided a brief respite from my crisis, a small validation I hadn't realized how desperately I needed. For a moment, I wasn't a failure sitting alone with an unpayable bill. I was an artist discussing my work with someone who actually appreciated it. As Connor continued examining my portfolio, I felt a strange shift in the dynamic between us. What had started as a confrontation was evolving into something resembling professional interest. "Have you considered selling these?" he asked, carefully returning a detailed piece to my portfolio. "I've sold a few smaller works," I admitted, "but nothing significant yet. The gallery I worked for was going to feature some of my pieces before they had to let me go." Connor nodded thoughtfully. "My brother Tyler owns a small gallery downtown. He focuses on emerging artists." He hesitated, then added, "Would you mind if I called him? He might be interested in your work." Hope flickered faintly. "That would be amazing, but would he come tonight?" "I'm still facing this immediate problem." I gestured to the bill that still sat ominously on the table. "Let me call him," Connor said, stepping away to make the call in private. While waiting, I tried Riley again, who confirmed she had transferred the $200 she promised. It was a drop in the bucket compared to what I owed, but it was something. I thanked her profusely. "What did your parents think would happen?" she asked, anger evident in her voice. "Did they expect you to magically produce $12,000? "I think they expected me to call them begging for help," I replied, the realization dawning on me. "To admit I'm a failure and that I need them. This is about control." Riley's response was immediate and fierce. "Screw that. Don't give them what they want." Her words strengthened my resolve. I would find another way out of this situation, any other way, before calling my parents. Connor returned 15 minutes later. "Tyler's on his way," he said. "He's intrigued by my description of your work. But I should be upfront. Even if he's interested, he probably won't be able to cover the entire bill immediately." "I understand," I said, grateful for even this sliver of hope. While we waited for Tyler, I noticed an elderly couple at a nearby table watching our interaction with undisguised interest. The woman whispered something to her husband, who nodded before standing up and approaching our table. "Excuse me," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "I'm Frank Wilson, and that's my wife Doris. We couldn't help overhearing some of your predicament." Embarrassment flooded me anew. "I'm so sorry to disturb your dinner," I began, but he waved away my apology. "Young lady, we've been coming to this restaurant for 30 years, and I've never seen such a disgraceful situation," he said. For a moment, I thought his criticism was directed at me, until he continued, "What kind of parents would do such a thing to their child?" The unexpected alliance brought fresh tears to my eyes. Frank turned to Connor. "I'd like to speak with the owner about how this establishment is handling the situation." Connor straightened. "Mr. Wilson, I assure you we're trying to find a resolution that works for everyone." "Are you?" Frank challenged. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're threatening a young woman with police action because of something entirely beyond her control." As the men talked, Doris came over and sat in the chair beside me. "My parents were difficult too," she said quietly, patting my hand. "Not quite this dramatic, but they never believed I could succeed on my own terms." "How did you handle it?" I asked. "I left," she said simply. "Built my own life. It was the hardest and best decision I ever made." She nodded toward Frank. "Met him 2 years later. He saw value in me that my family never did." Their unexpected kindness was overwhelming. These strangers were showing more compassion than my own parents had in years. 20 minutes later, Tyler arrived. He was younger than Connor, dressed casually in jeans and a button-down shirt, with the same observant eyes as his brother. He greeted me with a warm handshake before turning his attention to my portfolio. Unlike Connor's polite interest, Tyler's evaluation was intensely focused. He studied each piece in silence, occasionally asking technical questions about my process or inspiration. The minutes stretched uncomfortably as he reviewed my work, but I resisted the urge to fill the silence with nervous chatter. Finally, he looked up. "These are excellent," he said. "Particularly this series." He pointed to my urban nightscapes, a collection I'd created during my final year at RISD. There's something reminiscent of Edward Hopper, but with a modern architectural perspective that feels fresh. His specific, thoughtful feedback was validation I hadn't realized I was starving for. It wasn't the vague, very nice comments I'd received from family friends or the dismissive, interesting hobby remarks from my parents. This was a professional acknowledging my work on its artistic merits. "I'd like to feature these in my gallery," Tyler said. "And I'm prepared to purchase 2 pieces outright tonight." My heart raced. "How much are you offering?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The figure he named wasn't enough to cover the entire bill, but combined with Riley's contribution and what little I had in my account, it would make a significant dent. Relief washed over me, quickly followed by a new worry. "But these are some of my best pieces," I said. "I was hoping to build my portfolio with them." Tyler smiled. "That's exactly why I want them. They show your potential. And I'm not just buying the art, I'm investing in your future exhibitions at my gallery." As we negotiated terms, Connor approached with an update. "I've spoken with the management," he said. "Given the unusual circumstances, they've agreed to reduce the bill by 15% as a professional courtesy." The combination of Tyler's purchase, the discount, and the contributions from Riley and my own account still left me about $2,000 short. I was calculating how long it would take me to repay that amount when Frank Wilson approached again. "The difference is taken care of," he said firmly. "I can't accept that," I protested. "It's too much. Consider it an investment, not charity," Doris said, joining her husband. "But we do have one condition." "What's that?" I asked cautiously. "You don't go back to those people tonight," Frank said, his expression serious. "No one who would put their child in this position deserves to have that child returned to them." "But I have nowhere else to go," I admitted. Doris smiled. "We have a guest house that's sitting empty. It's yours until you find your feet." Their offer was so unexpected, so generous, that I couldn't speak. These strangers had done more for me in one evening than my parents had in years. As Tyler helped me gather my remaining artwork and Connor processed the various payments, my phone rang. It was my father. After hours of silence, now he was calling. My hand hovered over the screen, tempted to ignore it as they had ignored me. But something inside me needed closure. I answered. So, my father's voice came through, smug and expectant. "Did you learn your lesson?" "Did I learn my lesson?" I repeated, my voice steadier than I expected. "Yes, but probably not the one you intended. There was a pause on the other end of the line. What does that mean? How did you pay the bill? I sold my art, I replied, unable to keep a note of pride from my voice. 2 pieces, actually. His scoff was immediate and predictable. Don't be ridiculous. Who would buy your little drawings for that kind of money? The dismissal that would have crushed me hours earlier now strengthened my resolve. Someone who actually understands art, unlike you. And I'm not coming home tonight. Don't be dramatic, Amber, my mother's voice cut in. They had me on speakerphone. You're overreacting to a simple lesson in responsibility. A simple lesson? I echoed in disbelief. You left me with a $12,000 bill and blocked my calls. There's nothing simple about that. Where exactly do you think you're going to go? My father demanded, his tone shifting from smug to concerned as he realized his plan wasn't working out as expected. I looked at Frank and Doris, who were watching me with encouraging smiles, and at Tyler, who was carefully packing my remaining artwork into my portfolio. Even Connor, who had started as an adversary, now seemed firmly in my corner. I have options, I said simply. Goodbye. I ended the call before they could respond and turned off my phone completely. The simple act of disconnecting from them felt like removing a weight I'd carried for years. Tyler finished securing my portfolio and handed it to me. I meant what I said about featuring your work, he said. But I'd like to offer you something else as well. My gallery assistant left last month for graduate school. The position is part-time, but it includes studio space. The offer stunned me. You're offering me a job? You barely know me. I know your work, he countered. And I know talent when I see it. The rest we can figure out as we go. As we finalized the details of both the art sale and the potential job, other diners who had witnessed the evening's events stopped by our table. A marketing executive handed me her card, mentioning her firm sometimes commissioned original artwork for their clients. A retired art teacher praised the technique in my Cityscape series and asked if I offered workshops. What had begun as one of the most humiliating experiences of my life was transforming into an unexpected networking event. The very public nature of my parents' lesson had created an audience for my art and my story. When all the payments were processed and the bill finally settled, I found myself standing outside the restaurant with Frank and Doris, Tyler, and, surprisingly, Connor, who had ended his shift. You're welcome to stay with us as long as you need, Doris reiterated, giving me their address and a spare key. The guest house has a separate entrance, so you'll have your privacy. I can't thank you enough, I said, still overwhelmed by their kindness. Sometimes family is who you find, not who you're born to, Frank said, squeezing his wife's hand. We never had children of our own, but we've adopted quite a few strays over the years. Tyler offered to drive me to my parents' house to collect my belongings. I'll wait in the car if you want, he said, or I can come in for moral support. Just wait outside, I decided. This is something I need to do myself. The drive to Highland Park was quiet, giving me time to process the evening's events. My phone, which I'd turned back on, buzzed continuously with texts and calls from my parents, but I ignored them all. I would face them on my terms now. When we arrived, I asked Tyler to wait 30 minutes before coming to check on me. If I'm not up by then, call me. If I don't answer, then maybe worry. He nodded, understanding the seriousness beneath my attempt at humor. The house was ablaze with lights as I approached, suggesting my parents were anxiously awaiting my return. I used my key for what I knew would be the last time and stepped into the foyer. My mother appeared immediately, her carefully composed expression betrayed by the tension around her eyes. Amber, thank goodness. We were worried sick. Were you? I asked, moving past her toward the stairs. That's an interesting way to show concern. My father emerged from his study. Now listen here. I cut him off. No, you listen. I'm here to get my things, and then I'm leaving. Their shock was evident as I climbed the stairs to my bedroom. They followed, protests and justifications flowing. The lesson was for my own good. I needed to learn self-reliance. They were just trying to help me grow up. I tuned out their voices as I packed, taking only what was truly mine, my clothes, my art supplies, a few cherished books, and the quilt my grandmother had made me. I left behind the expensive watch they'd given me for graduation, the designer clothes they'd insisted I needed, all the trappings of the life they'd chosen for me. When my bags were packed, I faced them one last time in the hallway. "You wanted to teach me a lesson about surviving on my own? Congratulations. Lesson learned." "Where will you go?" my mother asked, her voice smaller now, perhaps finally realizing the magnitude of what they'd done. "Somewhere I'm valued for who I am, not punished for who I'm not," I replied. My father's face hardened. "You're making a mistake. Without us, you have nothing." I thought of Tyler waiting outside with my portfolio and a job offer. Of Frank and Doris and their guest house. Of Riley and her unfailing friendship. Of Connor and his unexpected support. "You're wrong," I said simply. "Without you, I finally have myself." I walked out the door without looking back, tears streaming down my face. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of finally breaking free. Tyler was waiting exactly where I'd left him, engine running and radio playing softly. He didn't ask questions when I loaded my bags into his car, just gave me a reassuring nod as I buckled my seatbelt. "Ready?" he asked. I glanced back at the house where I'd grown up, at the front door still standing open with my parents silhouetted in the light. "More than ready," I confirmed. The guest house behind Frank and Doris's Victorian home was charming, a converted carriage house with exposed brick walls and large windows that would provide excellent natural light for painting. They showed me around with genuine excitement, pointing out the fully stocked kitchen and the small garden space outside my door. "We use it for visiting family mostly," Doris explained, "but no one's expected until Thanksgiving." "This is too generous," I protested again. "At least let me pay rent or help around your property." Frank waved away my concerns. "We'll discuss details later. Tonight, you need rest." After they left, I sat on the edge of the unfamiliar bed, the events of the evening washing over me in waves. My phone continued buzzing with messages from my parents, alternating between demands that I return home immediately and softer pleas to at least let them know I was safe. I sent a single text, "I'm safe but need space," before silencing notifications from their numbers. I slept fitfully that first night, dreams filled with unpayable bills and disappearing parents. When morning came, I half expected to wake up in my childhood bedroom, the previous night's events nothing more than an elaborate nightmare. Instead, I opened my eyes to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the distant sound of birds in the garden. My new reality. Tyler had arranged for me to come to his gallery that afternoon to discuss the job and to deliver my purchased artwork. I spent the morning organizing my few belongings in the guest house and creating a budget based on the salary he'd mentioned. It would be tight, but combined with future art sales, it could work. For the first time in my adult life, I was making plans that didn't involve my parents' approval or financial support. The gallery was smaller than where I'd worked in Chicago, but beautifully curated, with a mix of established and emerging artists. The exposed brick walls and polished concrete floors provided a perfect backdrop for the contemporary pieces on display. Tyler greeted me warmly, introducing me to his assistant manager, Maya, before showing me to the small office that would be my workspace and the studio space in the back that came with the position. "It's not huge," he said, gesturing to the studio, "but it has good light and ventilation for painting." "It's perfect," I replied, already envisioning how I would set up my easel and supplies. The job itself was straightforward, helping with gallery administration, coordinating with artists, assisting during openings, and maintaining the website. The hours were flexible, allowing me time to create my own work. "When can you start?" Tyler asked. "Tomorrow?" I suggested, eager to dive into this new chapter. He laughed. "I like your enthusiasm. Tomorrow it is." That evening, I returned to the guest house to find Doris had left a casserole and a welcome note on the counter. The simple kindness brought tears to my eyes. I sent her a thank you text, which led to an invitation to join them for dinner the following night. Over a home-cooked meal that bore no resemblance to the expensive but emotionally fraught dinners of my childhood, I learned more about Frank and Doris. He was a retired English professor. She had been a pediatric nurse. They had met in their 30s, both having left difficult family situations in their 20s. "Family is complicated," Doris said as she served apple pie for dessert. "Sometimes the hardest part is accepting that you can't change people who don't want to change." "I spent years trying to earn my parents' approval," I admitted. "Nothing was ever enough." Frank nodded sympathetically. "Some people need control more than they need connection." It took me a long time to understand that my father's criticism wasn't about my failings, it was about his need to feel superior. Their insights helped me begin to process my own family dynamics from a new perspective. Perhaps my parents' lessons had less to do with helping me succeed and more to do with maintaining their control over my life. My first day at the gallery passed in a blur of new information and tasks. Tyler was a patient mentor, and Maya's friendly efficiency made the learning curve less intimidating. By the end of the week, I was settling into a routine that included morning work at the gallery, afternoon painting sessions in my new studio space, and occasional dinners with Frank and Doris. My parents continued their campaign of calls and texts, escalating to emails and even messages through Riley when I maintained my distance. They veered between anger, "After everything we've done for you," manipulation, "Your mother is beside herself with worry," and bargaining, "We can discuss more independence if you come home." I held firm, responding only with brief assurances of my safety and well-being. Each day of distance gave me more clarity about the toxicity of our relationship. 2 weeks after the incident, as I'd come to call it, I sold my first painting through Tyler's gallery. It wasn't a large sale, but it was to a genuine collector who appreciated my work on its own merits. The validation was worth far more than the dollar amount. "We should celebrate," Tyler suggested, closing the gallery after the sale. "Dinner? There's a great Thai place around the corner." What had begun as a professional relationship was evolving into friendship and possibly something more. Tyler was easy to talk to, genuinely interested in my work, and refreshingly direct. Our dinner conversation flowed naturally from art to movies to childhood memories, carefully skirting around my recent family drama. As weeks turned into months, I established a new life for myself. I found an affordable apartment close to the gallery, though I still visited Frank and Doris regularly for dinner. My work began attracting more attention, with several pieces selling to private collectors. Tyler featured my Urban Nights series in a group show of emerging artists, which led to a favorable mention in a local arts publication. The highlight came 6 months after that fateful dinner, when Tyler offered me a solo exhibition at his gallery. "Your new work is ready," he said, reviewing my latest pieces. "It's time to introduce Amber Mitchell to the art world properly." Planning the exhibition consumed my days and nights for weeks. I created new pieces to complement my existing work, developing a cohesive collection that told the story of urban isolation and unexpected connection. Themes that had come to define my own recent experiences. The opening night of my exhibition coincided almost exactly with the 6-month anniversary of my parents' lesson. The irony wasn't lost on me as I stood in the gallery surrounded by my artwork and people who had come specifically to see it. Frank and Doris arrived early, bringing a small gift, a vintage paint box that had belonged to Doris's aunt. "For our favorite artist," Frank said with a wink. Riley drove in from out of town, enveloping me in a fierce hug. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "And I never doubted you for a second." Even Connor from the restaurant came, bringing his girlfriend and purchasing one of my smaller pieces. "I knew that night you were the real deal," he told me. The gallery filled with art lovers, critics, and collectors. I moved through the crowd, discussing my work and accepting congratulations, a glass of champagne in hand. Tyler stayed close, his quiet support a steadying presence as I navigated my first solo exhibition opening. During a brief lull in conversations, I noticed a new pair of attendees enter the gallery. My champagne nearly slipped from my fingers as I recognized my parents. They stood uncertainly in the entrance, my mother clutching her purse like a shield, my father scanning the room until his eyes landed on me. They looked smaller somehow, less intimidating than I remembered. Tyler noticed my sudden tension. "Everything okay?" "My parents are here," I said quietly. His expression hardened. Want me to ask them to leave? I considered it for a moment, then shook my head. No, I can handle this. I approached them with measured steps, conscious of how different I was from the desperate, humiliated daughter they'd abandoned 6 months ago. My hair was cut in a stylish bob I'd never have dared try under their roof. My dress was vintage rather than designer. My posture was straight, unburdened by the weight of their expectations. Amber, my mother said, her voice catching. You look well. I am well, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. What are you doing here? We saw the announcement in the Tribune, my father explained. Your exhibition. We wanted to see. The old me would have been pathetically grateful for their attention, eager to prove my worth through their validation. The new me recognized this for what it was. An attempt to reassert themselves in my life now that I was finding success. The exhibition runs for 3 weeks, I said. You're welcome to look around. I turned to walk away, but my mother caught my arm. Amber, please. Can we talk? We've been so worried. Now isn't the time, I said firmly, gently removing her hand. This is my night. My father's expression darkened with familiar disapproval. After everything we've done for you, you can't spare 5 minutes? Everything you've done for me, I repeated, keeping my voice low but intense. Like abandoning me with a $12,000 bill? Like calling me a failure my entire life? Like treating my passion as a hobby and my independence as a personal insult? He had the grace to look uncomfortable. We were trying to teach you responsibility. No, I corrected him. You were trying to break me so I'd come crawling back. But instead, you set me free. I gestured to the gallery around us. This is who I am. Not your failure, not your project. Just me, succeeding on my own terms. A nearby collector caught my attention, waving me over to discuss a potential purchase. I gave my parents a polite nod. Enjoy the exhibition. Or don't. Either way, this is happening without your approval. As I walked away, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. They no longer had the power to define my worth. Whatever relationship we might rebuild in the future, if any, would be on equal terms, not as disappointed parents and failing child. The exhibition was a success beyond my expectations. I sold 15 pieces that night, including my centerpiece to a prominent local collector. Tyler couldn't stop grinning as he tallied the sales. This is just the beginning, he promised. My parents left without purchasing anything or speaking to me again. I spotted them studying my work, my father's expression unreadable, my mother dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Part of me hoped they finally really saw me, through my art. Another part recognized that their approval was no longer necessary for my happiness. As the last guests departed and Tyler locked the gallery doors, he turned to me with a smile. How does it feel to be a successful artist, Amber Mitchell? I returned his smile, thinking of the long journey from that restaurant table to this moment. It feels like coming home, I replied. To myself. 6 months after my first solo exhibition, life had settled into a rhythm I could never have imagined on that fateful night at Lucille. My work continued to gain recognition in local art circles, with 3 more pieces selling to the same collector who had purchased my centerpiece. I had moved from part-time to full-time at Tyler's gallery, balancing administrative work with my own creative pursuits. The guest house behind Frank and Doris's home had given way to a small but charming apartment above a bookstore in the arts district. My space was filled with light and plants, canvases in various stages of completion leaning against the walls. For the first time in my life, I was truly independent, financially, emotionally, and creatively. My relationship with Tyler had evolved too, from professional to personal. We moved cautiously at first, both aware of the complications that could arise from mixing business with pleasure. But our shared passion for art and authentic connection made the transition feel natural. I have something to show you, Tyler said one evening as we closed the gallery. A surprise. He led me to a previously empty wall in the main exhibition space where a new sign had been installed, coming soon, Urban Reflections, new works by Amber Mitchell. Another solo show? I asked, stunned by the prime placement and timing, just a year after my first exhibition. You've earned it, he said simply. Your new series is your strongest work yet. The validation of my art, not from parents or professors, but from someone who truly understood the art world, still felt surreal. Each small success helped rebuild the confidence that years of parental criticism had eroded. As preparations for the new exhibition began, an unexpected email arrived from Zach Forrester, a former classmate from RISD who had gone on to become a respected art critic for several online publications. He was in town reviewing exhibitions and had seen the announcement for my upcoming show. "Would love to catch up and preview your new work," he wrote. "Your last exhibition generated quite a buzz." Seeing him again after nearly 3 years was both strange and comforting. We had been close in college, not quite dating but more than casual friends, before life pulled us in different directions after graduation. He visited the gallery during off hours, and we spent the afternoon discussing my new urban series and his recent writing projects. "Your work has evolved dramatically," he observed, studying a large canvas depicting a rain-soaked cityscape at dusk. "There's a confidence in these pieces that's compelling." "A lot has changed," I admitted, giving him a condensed version of the past year's events. His expression darkened as I described my parents' lesson at the restaurant. "That's beyond teaching a lesson, Amber. That's emotional abuse." No one had used that term before, and hearing it spoken aloud was jarring. I had called their actions cruel, manipulative, and controlling, but abuse felt both too strong and eerily accurate. "I'm still processing everything," I said. "Some days I'm angry. Some days I just feel relieved to be free." Zach stayed in town longer than planned, attending gallery events and joining Tyler and me for dinners. His perspective as both an old friend and a professional critic provided valuable feedback on my new work. More importantly, reconnecting with someone who had known me before, someone who remembered my early artistic struggles and triumphs, helped bridge the gap between my past and present selves. What began as a professional reunion evolved into something more as Zach extended his stay. Tyler, ever perceptive, noticed the chemistry between us before I fully acknowledged it myself. "You and Zach have history," he observed one evening after Zach had left our dinner early to finish a review. "We were close in college," I admitted. "Nothing serious ever happened, but there was always something there." Tyler nodded thoughtfully. "I see the way he looks at your work. And at you." His smile was genuine, if a little sad. Sometimes timing is everything. Our conversation that night led to a gentle, mutual decision to return to being friends and colleagues. Tyler remained my strongest professional advocate and a trusted friend, while my relationship with Zach deepened into something neither of us had been ready for during our college years. 2 weeks before my second exhibition opening, as Zach and I were discussing which pieces to highlight in the show, my phone rang with my parents' number. I had maintained minimal contact with them since the night of my first exhibition, occasional text messages and one brief, awkward lunch that had ended with my father questioning the sustainability of an art career. "I should take this," I said to Zach, who nodded and stepped away to give me privacy. "Hello," I answered, bracing myself. "Amber." My mother's voice sounded strained. "We just heard from the Prestons that you have another exhibition coming up." Of course, they hadn't learned about it directly from the gallery announcements I knew they received or the local arts publications. It had to come through their social network, framed as potential gossip or concern. "Yes, it opens in 2 weeks," I confirmed. "Your father and I would like to attend," she said formally, as if requesting an audience. "If that's all right with you." A year ago, I would have desperately craved their presence, seeing it as validation of my choices. Now, I felt oddly detached from their approval. "The opening is on the 15th at 7, I said. "It's open to the public." There was a pause. "We thought perhaps we could see it beforehand. Privately. And maybe have dinner afterward to catch up." The request, reasonable on its surface, triggered an immediate tension in my chest. Private viewings were for collectors and critics, not for parents who had spent years dismissing my art as a hobby. And dinner carried its own traumatic associations now. "The gallery is quite busy with preparations," I said carefully. "But you're welcome to come to the opening like other guests." My mother's disappointment was palpable even through the phone. "I see." Another pause. "We've been hoping to reconnect, Amber. To make amends." I'm not ready for that, I admitted, surprising myself with my honesty. Maybe someday, but not now. The conversation ended shortly after, leaving me with a familiar mixture of guilt and resolve. Zach, who had heard enough to understand the context, placed a supportive hand on my shoulder. Setting boundaries isn't the same as holding grudges, he said quietly. You're protecting your peace. The night of my second exhibition opening arrived with the nervous excitement I suspected would never fade, no matter how many shows I held. The gallery was transformed by strategic lighting that highlighted the play of shadow and reflection in my urban series. Soft jazz played in the background as early attendees began to arrive. Frank and Doris came first, as they had for my previous show, bringing a small wrapped package. Just a token, Frank said as I opened it to find a vintage fountain pen. For signing all those sales receipts you'll be getting tonight. Riley arrived next with her new boyfriend, followed by a steady stream of collectors, critics, and art enthusiasts. Zach stayed close, his presence both professional. He would be reviewing the show for ArtView and personal. An hour into the event, as I was discussing technique with a potential buyer, I spotted my parents entering the gallery. They were dressed formally, my mother in a designer dress I recognized from her special occasion collection, my father in his standard business suit. They looked polished and prosperous, and completely out of place among the eclectic, artsy crowd. Unlike their tentative entrance at my first show, they moved through the gallery with purpose, examining each piece methodically. I excused myself from my conversation and approached them, Zach following a few steps behind. You came, I said, stating the obvious. Of course, my mother replied, her smile tight. We wouldn't miss it. My father gestured to the nearest painting, a complex cityscape viewed through a rain-streaked window. These are quite impressive, Amber. Very technical. It was probably the closest thing to approval he had ever expressed about my art, yet it felt hollow, an assessment rather than appreciation. Thank you, I said, then introduced Zach. This is Zach Forrester. He's an art critic with ArtView and other publications. My father's demeanor shifted instantly, his business persona taking over as he shook Zach's hand. Forrester? Any relation to Senator Forrester from Connecticut? My uncle, Zach confirmed with a polite smile. The revelation that I was dating someone with connections to a political family visibly elevated my stock in my father's estimation. His subsequent questions focused on Zach's background and family rather than his work or our relationship. I excused myself to speak with other guests, leaving Zach to navigate my parents' suddenly enthusiastic interest. Throughout the evening, I noticed them working the room as if it were one of their business functions, introducing themselves as Amber's parents to key collectors and gallery owners. When they approached me again near the end of the night, my father's expression had the familiar calculation I recognized from childhood. He was reassessing my value now that my art showed commercial potential and my boyfriend had valuable connections. We're very proud of what you've accomplished, he said, his tone suggesting he was claiming partial credit for my success. We always knew you had potential. The comment that would once have filled me with pathetic gratitude now rang hollow. Did you? I asked quietly, because I remember being called a failure more than anything else. My mother flinched. Amber, that's not fair. We pushed you because we believed in you. No, I corrected her gently but firmly. You pushed me because you wanted me to be a reflection of your success, not my own person. My father's expression hardened. After everything we've provided, your education, your upbringing. I'm grateful for the privileges I had, I interrupted, keeping my voice level. But material support doesn't make up for emotional abandonment, or for publicly humiliating your daughter to teach her a lesson. Other guests were beginning to notice our tense conversation. Tyler approached smoothly, exhibition catalog in hand. Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, have you seen the write-up of Amber's work? The critics have been extremely positive. His intervention gave me a moment to compose myself. When my parents turned back to me, I spoke before they could. I'm building my own life now, I said. If you want to be part of it, it has to be on new terms. Not as the directors of my life, but as people who respect my choices and my work. The gallery was emptying, the opening night winding down. Tyler announced the final call for questions and purchases. My parents stood awkwardly, caught between their desire to maintain appearances and their frustration at my newfound boundaries. "Perhaps we could have lunch next week," my mother suggested tentatively. "Just to talk." It was a small opening, neither an apology nor an acknowledgement of past wrongs, but it was something. "I'll check my schedule," I said, not committing but not refusing. They left shortly after, purchasing one small piece from the exhibition, more, I suspected, to save face than from genuine appreciation. Their validation, once so desperately important to me, now felt like an afterthought. As the last guests departed and Tyler's staff began cleaning up, I found myself standing before my centerpiece with Zach beside me. The large canvas depicted a solitary figure walking away from a brightly lit building toward a cityscape full of possibility and unknown adventures. "You know," Zach said thoughtfully, "when we were in school, your work was technically brilliant but cautious. Now there's a boldness, an emotional honesty that's transformed your technique." "Pain is a powerful teacher," I replied, studying the painting that had unconsciously captured my own journey. "So is freedom," he countered, taking my hand. The exhibition was a commercial and critical success, with most pieces selling within the first week. Zach's review highlighted the emotional authenticity and technical evolution of my work, positioning me as an emerging artist to watch. Tyler began discussions about a more permanent arrangement with the gallery, including dedicated studio space and regular exhibitions. A month after the opening, I signed the lease on my first true studio, a light-filled loft in an old factory building converted for artists. As I arranged my easels and supplies in the space that was entirely my own, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past year. The cruel joke my parents had played. Abandoning me with an unpayable bill to teach me a lesson about failure had instead taught me the most valuable lessons of my life, that I was stronger than I knew, that genuine connection could be found in unexpected places, and that true success came from being authentically myself, not from meeting others' expectations. I opened the windows of my studio, letting in the spring breeze, and set a fresh canvas on my easel. Outside, the city sprawled in all its complex beauty. Inside, I was finally home. Have you ever had someone's cruel action accidentally lead to your greatest growth? Or found family in unexpected places when your biological one failed you? Share your stories in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales of overcoming life's unexpected challenges. Thank you for joining me on this journey from abandonment to empowerment. Remember, sometimes the worst moments in our lives become the catalysts for our greatest transformations.